What's going on, everybody? And I hope you're enjoying your Monday afternoon so far. This is NYG Jeffy T85 here, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of the prospects coming out of this past weekend's Senior Bowl that I think the New York Giants might have a little bit more interest in and could potentially be some early to mid round targets the Giants could look at to improve their roster going into the 2023 NFL Draft. Now, as we all know, the Senior Bowl is pretty much a position. It's pretty much a practice which can highlight some of these seniors that are going to be coming out of school and are going to be heading into the NFL Draft that might not be getting all the laud, all the praise, all the notoriety that some of the younger underclassmen are going to be getting right now for, going into the draft. So, the one thing that I am looking for when it comes to these seniors coming out of the Senior Bowl is which players might be A, good fits, B, have the experience playing in at least 3-4 years as starters in their offense, and C, might be ready-made players that could step in immediately and be contributors for the team going in early. Some juniors, it takes them a little bit of time. If they come out a year earlier before their senior year, it takes them a little bit of time to get going into the NFL. Whereas if you have a senior, he has an extra year of experience and maybe it helps him get into the NFL, depending on the team he goes to and depending on the fit. But obviously we know the biggest issues with the New York Giants. Wide receiver, interior offensive line, secondary cornerback, maybe a slot cornerback, defensive line depth, obviously offensive line depth, middle linebacker. Those are really the biggest issues with the New York Giants. If you want to throw a punter in there too, but I don't think we're going to be finding a punter in the draft. That's most likely going to either happen in free agency or maybe through like another means, undrafted free agent or something. So some of the guys that really stood out in the Senior Bowl, and actually a lot of them were interior offensive linemen. And a couple of the guys that I really like, there's one guy especially that I thought stood out the most in terms of the offensive line, and there were a lot of offensive linemen for the American and the National League teams that really looked good in this past Senior Bowl. One of them, to me, is O'Cyrus Torrence, the inside lineman, the interior offensive lineman for the Florida Gators. 6'5", 337-pound senior. This guy is a dominant force in the middle of that offensive line. He's a senior. He's a massive guy. Like I said, 6'5", 337. He could play tackle, but I think he's better suited for a guard. He would be an absolute perfect guy to get somewhere in the 2nd to 4th round in the NFL Draft. This is the prototypical guy I would love to see if he's there at around pick number 57 for the Giants. He would be perfect to bring into the offensive line. Slide him in at one of the guard positions. If you want to maybe have him be a backup to start, you're going to plan on going with a Zudu or Bredesen and Glowinski at the guard positions. You have a guy like Torrance who could step in maybe halfway through the season or going into next season at the offensive guard position. This is a guy I would definitely love to see step in at that guard position. And he would be a definite target that I would like the Giants to go after. Another guy is Steve Avila, the interior offensive lineman from TCU. That's another guy I would like to see the Giants potentially target in one of those middle rounds during the NFL Draft. This guy, as well as another aggressive offensive lineman, good at run blocking. He's versatile too, so he can pretty much kick it in to the center position. He can maybe even play. I think he's a little bit too small to play tackle, but he's another guy I would like to see if he's around those middle rounds. I don't like him as much as O'Cyrus Torrence, but he's another guy that I would potentially look at as a guy that the Giants can maybe invest in terms of the offensive line. So that's another guy I would like. In terms of the offensive line, is O'Cyrus Torrence as well as Steve Avila in the interior offensive line. In terms of the cornerback position, Darian Rush. I thought he really had a nice showing as well at the cornerback position out of South Carolina. 6'2", to 196 pounds. Has the size on the outside to be able to deal with some of the larger wide receivers out there. And he's actually not that. He's pretty smooth and he's got decent size, and he's also got a little bit of quickness. He has hip fluidity too, so he's not going to get beat easily on some of those deep, quick passes on the outside by some speed pass rushers. He does struggle a little bit against the run. That's his problem. He needs to do a better job in run defense. So that's one guy I would look to as a potential maybe mid-round guy too, around the 3rd, 4th round. I think is where you can get a Darian Rush. So that's one of the guys too I would potentially look to target in terms of the cornerback position in the NFL draft if he's there. I thought he had a pretty decent showing, pretty good showing in the Senior Bowl the other day. I like Aubrey Miller. I thought Aubrey Miller had a really good showing as well. I think Aubrey Miller could potentially be a guy that the Giants could look at in terms of the performance he had in the Senior Bowl. 6'2" type of player. I think he, out of Jackson State, that's a guy who was aggressive. He was instinctive in his tackles. If that guy is anywhere near the 3rd or 4th or 5th round, that's a guy I would look to maybe go after too. We need size in the middle linebacker position. Aubrey Miller is that. That's a guy I would look to as well. I really liked what Aubrey Miller did in the Senior Bowl. So if he's around, that's a player I would potentially look to target as well. Derek Hall out of Auburn. A defensive end, a pass rusher. What are the Giants so good at over the years? Getting pass rush depth. That's one other guy that I would love to see the Giants potentially target as well, is another pass rusher. Thibodeau is still got to round out his game in terms of being an overall pass rusher. He tried to use 1 or 2 moves. He needs to develop more moves in his pass rush game to really be known as a complete pass rusher overall. I think he's just too limited right now overall in his defensive scheme. And also Ojulari, as good as Ojulari was when he actually played, it's just the question of when he played. Ojulari has got to stay healthy, and I would just keep adding more pass rushers to this defense going forward. Derek Hall out of Auburn would be the prototypical guy that I would look to as well. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that has size too? That's the guy I would look to in terms of his size overall. 6'3" overall. He's a 6'3" guy. Why not? Add more depth to the defensive line. Add more depth. You can never have enough pass rushers on your team. And in terms of the wide receiver position, Michael Wilson out of Stanford. I heard a couple of guys say, my good buddies, BigBlue in the Bronx, talk about Michael Wilson from Stanford, 6'2", 216 pounds. He's another guy. He's got good measurables on the outside, good size, NFL-ready frame, bigger wide receiver. And he has a very decent route runner, too. For a 6'2", 216-pound guy to be a decent, precise route runner, that's exactly what we need. A larger receiver that knows how to run decent routes. And he's explosive in and out of his routes, and he's polished. He's a polished route runner coming out. I think this is a guy that the Giants should go for in the later rounds. You need a bigger receiver that's a good route runner that has size. Why not go for this kid and see what he can do? And also, Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed's another one. And also Jonathan Mingo. Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. More of an inside-out wide receiver. He creates yards after the catch. He's like a Jalen Waddle type, but obviously not the talent that Jalen Waddle is. Speed for days. So that's what you could use. And the Giants were the slowest wide receiver core in the NFL this past season. You need speed at that position. Jaden Reed in the 4th, 5th round. Why not? 5'11", 191 pounds. Get the ball in his hands. He breaks tackles. Explosive with the ball in his hands after the catch. That's a guy I would look to. And Jonathan Mingo. That's another one. Out of Ole Miss. That's another receiver that I would potentially look for. You know, he's got some size to him as well. Jonathan Mingo is another one of those bigger receivers out of Ole Miss. So, I mean, you want an outside receiver that can really go up there and high point the ball, 6'2", 225 pounds? If he's anything like DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown, sign me up. That's another guy that I would potentially look to target in the draft. I mean, there's a bunch of different options the Giants could look at in terms of, the overall prospects coming out of this past Senior Bowl. wide receiver, interior offensive line, defensive line depth, pass rush, cornerback on the outside. Any one of these guys could potentially be a guy you could target. Michael Wilson, Jaden Reed, Jonathan Mingo, Steve Avila, Osiris Torrance, forget about Mock, another player as well, Derek Hall. I mean, you could talk about Darius Rush. A lot of good players that came out of the Senior Bowl that raised their stock and potentially be guys the Giants could look for in the middle rounds in the NFL draft that maybe you weren't initially looking at when we first started talking about the NFL draft going forward. But we'll have to wait and see what the Giants are going to decide to do as we get closer and closer to Combine, which is going to be later this month, and as well as you get to individual workouts going on in March and April. And that's going to really see where some of these players stock up in terms of their overall play, and if they could even raise their stock to potential second, maybe even first-round picks if they grade out very well during their combine and individual workouts. You never know. But I just want to go over a couple of names that I think really impressed at the Senior Bowl and actually would be pretty good fits with the New York Giants at positions that we could use some help for when we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. It also depends on what we do in free agency too and what kind of holes we fix, what players we bring back, etc. So there's still a lot more work to do, restructures, extensions, cuts, etc. What guys we bring back, what players we sign in free agency. That'll have a lot to do with what we do exactly in the draft. But either way, those are some of the players that I would like to see the Giants target in this upcoming NFL draft. You guys let me know in the comment section some other players that you really thought stood out in the Senior Bowl this past Sunday, and what players you really think have a legit chance to be targets for the New York Giants to look at in this upcoming NFL draft. You guys let me know in the comment section what you thought of, if you agree with the players that I listed and that I think could be good fits with the Giants in the NFL draft coming out of the Senior Bowl, and what other players you think could be other options the Giants could look at coming out of the Senior Bowl that the Giants could target in the NFL draft. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Monday, and as always, take it easy and let's go New York Football Giants. Together Blue, everyone.